Good morning, Pre-Cal students. Today we are going to learn how to solve trig equations. If you are in Pre-AP, you have to have memorized your unit circle. That is extremely important. All right, let's start off by talking about the interval over which the answers can lie. Your answers can lie from 0 to 2 pi, but not including 0, not including 2 pi. You see the parentheses? Parentheses mean non-inclusive. So here we go. Using our unit circle, what angle has a sine value of square root of 3 over 2? So there are two angles that have a sine value square root of 3 over 2, and they are a 30, which is pi over 6, and a 150, which is 5 pi over 6. And that is our answer. And both angles lie on the interval 0 to 2 pi. Okay, our second problem, we have 2 cosine theta minus 1 is equal to 0. We're going to start by adding 1 to both sides. So we're down to 2 cosine theta is equal to 1. Divide by 2, divide by 2. Now we're down to cosine theta is equal to 1/2. So we've got to think what angles you're solving for theta. You're trying to find theta. That's the only variable. What angles have a cosine value of 1/2? Cosine of 1/2, that would be a 60, which is pi over 3, and a 300, which is 5 pi over 3. Both of these angles lie in the interval 0 to 2 pi, so those are both great answers. Moving on, example 3. Again, we'll have to add 1, so we'll be down to 2 sine squared theta is equal to 1. Now we'll divide both sides by 2, so we'll be down to sine squared theta equals 1/2. We will take the square root of both sides. And remember, whenever you take the square root, you've got to put plus minus. So now we're down to sine of theta is equal to positive or negative square root of 1/2, which could be written square root of 1 over square root of 2. You know we're never allowed to leave square roots in the bottom, so we rationalize. We multiply by square root of 2 over 2. So now we have sine of theta is equal to positive or negative square root of 2 over the square root of 4, which is 2. So what angles have a sine value of positive or negative square root of 2 over 2? Those would be 45, or pi over 4. Pi over 4 has a sine value of positive square root of 2. 3 pi over 4 also has a sine value of positive square root of 2 over 2. 5 pi over 4 has a sine value negative square root of 2 over 2, and 7 pi over 4 has a sine value negative square root of 2 over 2. Those four answers lie in the interval 0 to 2 pi. Now look at the next example. We're limiting our interval. We're only taking 0 to pi, inclusive. So we're going to include 0, and we're going to include pi in the answer. So our answers have to lie on that upper half of the circle. In example 1, we will need to factor. Notice we have a binomial, and both terms have cosine in them. So we will factor cosine theta out. We will have 2 cosine theta plus 1 inside parentheses equals 0. Just like we did in Algebra 2, when we factored, we would set our factors equal to 0. That's exactly what we're going to do. The cosine of theta equals 0, and 2 cosine theta plus 1 equals 0. And then we solve each one. So over here, we can solve immediately cosine of theta, what angle has a cosine value of 0? That would be pi over 2. And over here we have to do a little extra solving. We'll have to subtract 1. So 2 cosine theta equals -1. Divide by 2. And now we're down to cosine theta is equal to -1/2. So we think what angles have a cosine value of -1/2? So that would be a 120, which is on the upper arc, so 2 pi over 3. And the other one would be a 240, which is not on the interval 0 to pi. So that would be the only answer to that part. So both of them are answers to the whole thing. In the next example, example 2, I notice I have a trinomial. I have 3 terms. When we have 3 terms, we're going to factor like this. So we think in FOIL, the first times the first always equals our first. So what times what will give me 2 sine squared? That would be 2 sine theta times 1 sine theta, or just sine theta. And in FOIL, the last number times the last number always gives me the last number. So I think, what times what will give me a -1? Well, -1 times a +1 will give me -1. The trick is to make sure that these two add up to give me sine theta. Does my outside times my outside and inside times my inside give me sine theta? So outside times outside gives me 2 sine theta. Inside times inside gives me -1 sine theta. And together, because they are like terms, that gives me 1 sine theta. And so it's correct, it matches. So now we take our two factors, and we set them equal to 0. So we have 2 sine theta minus 1 equals 0, and sine theta plus 1 equals 0. And we will add 1 and divide by 2. So we'll get sine theta equals 1/2. What angles have a sine value of 1/2 that lie on the upper half of the circle, 0 to pi? Sine of 1/2, that would be a 30, which is pi over 6, and a 150, 5 pi over 6. All right, we subtract 1. Sine theta is equal to -1. The only angle that has a sine value of -1 is 270, or 3 pi over 2, which does not lie on the upper half of the circle. So these will be our only 2 answers. Last example, same thing. We're going to factor, and then we will set our factors equal to 0. So we have 2 cosine theta times 1 cosine theta equals 2 cosine squared theta. Two numbers that multiply together to give me a +2, which means the signs have to be the same, would be a -1 times a -2. That would work. The trick is we want to make sure that outside inside gives me a -5 cosine theta. Outside times outside is -2 cosine theta. Inside times inside is -4, my bad. -4 cosine theta. Inside times inside is -1 cosine theta, and that makes our -5 cosine theta. It is factored correctly, so we take our factors. 2 cosine theta minus 1 equal to 0, and cosine theta minus 2 equal to 0. So we'll add 1, so that gives us 2 cosine theta equals 1. Divide by 2. So now we're down to cosine theta equals 1/2. What angles have a cosine value of 1/2? That would be a 60, which is on the interval, so pi over 3. And the other angle would be a 300, which does not lie in the interval, so we will not write that one. Add 2, cosine theta equals 2. There is no angle that has a cosine value of 2. No angle has a cosine value of 2. So this one is just a scratch. All right, and the last example, I'm going to add sine squared to both sides. So now I'm trying to think of cosine squared equals sine squared. And if I were to take the square root of each side, I would have cosine theta is equal to sine of theta. And so I would think to myself, where does my cosine value equal my sine value? What angles in the unit circle would my cosine and my sine, that would be my x and my y, where do they equal? Well, the only two places that's going to happen would be at pi over 4 and at 5 pi over 4. So we had to just use a little common sense for that one. And that interval was 0 to 2 pi. They both lie within that interval, so they are both fine answers. Y'all have a great day and good luck with these. And now you'll do the worksheet.